welcome to everyone who's coming to this webinar. And just so everyone, they should be in the right place, but this is for Toby Freedman talking about different career opportunities in biotechnology. And just a little bit about Toby. She did her PhD at UNC Chapel Hill and then did a postdoc at Harvard University. She then later transitioned into the biotechnology and drug development sector, doing consultant work, wrote an awesome book that has helped a lot of people, which we're going to talk about, career opportunities in biotechnology and drug development. And she has now been working as a recruiter for a life sciences company in the Bay Area. So she does a lot of these career talks in her off time, but then we're as a benefit to everyone else, and we're very happy to have her here today, but also works full-time as a recruiter for life sciences and biotechnology. So thank you, Toby, for spending this time today with us.
Great, thank you for the invitation. And I should also mention, well, thank you for inviting me to speak. You can ask questions through the Q&A feature.
Yes. Yeah, that's one thing I meant to mention. Yeah, just as Toby said, any questions, please submit through the Q&A. And then in the last 15, 20 minutes portion of the hour, I will ask some of the more popular ones or ones that come up to Toby. So if you have any burning questions, submit them, please.
Okay, would you like me to go now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. A little bit about my bio, which was already sort of mentioned, but I basically fell in love with molecular biology, and then I went to graduate school. And I didn't want to be a professor. And what do you do when you graduate and you don't know what you want to do? You do a postdoc, right? So I did 2 postdocs, which were quite fun. And then my fellowship expired and I joined industry. I joined a biotech startup, which was really, really fun. And I realized that everything everybody said in academia about industry was incorrect. So, and then I worked in this startup for 3 years, and then I joined an executive recruiting firm called BioQuest, a really good top-notch firm. And then I quit my high-paying job, and I took 3 years off and wrote the book, which is right here, Career Opportunities in Biotechnology and Drug Development, published by Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory Press. And then I basically work as a recruiter. As Amanda mentioned, I only work for small Bay Area, San Francisco area biotech startups, only biotech recruiting. And I also, on the side, give occasional talks and workshops about careers in life sciences. So the reason I wrote the book and the reason I'm speaking to you today is to help you find a job that you truly love. And what I'm showing is a happy alarm clock, meaning you just can't wait to get up in the morning and go to work because you love your job so much. And that's the goal. And I love this quote, if you are doing what you love, then it's not really work. So so you should do some self-reflection and really think about what your current job is and where you're heading. And if you feel like you're not on the right track, this is a good time to do some self-assessment and think about other opportunities. So here you are right now. And there are many, many careers for scientists. So there's many careers in industry, which we're going to talk about today. But there's also lots of great careers in government, research institutes, and nonprofits. And there's many careers in academia. In addition to being tenured professor, there's many, many other careers. And so there's many options for you. And what I'm showing you here is the results of my research. So I spent 3 years studying about careers in industry, and I interviewed 225 industry professionals, not about their careers, but about their jobs. And I summarized all the data, and I broke it down into 20 vocational areas. There's one not in here on entrepreneurship. And basically, what I'm showing you on this chart, which is a phylogenetic tree. So here's the idea: discovery research, preclinical and process sciences, going down to project management, clinical and regulatory, into medical affairs, marketing, sales, and product support, corporate communications, business development, operations, quality, bio-IT, management consulting, venture capital, law, and recruiting. But basically what I'm addressing here is what you can do with a science or medical background. These are the careers, and I've outlined them in great detail and describe, the pros and cons of the career, what a typical day is like, all sorts of information, more than I can cover in a talk. But first, before we talk about these careers, I'd like to give you a sort of an overview of how to make a drug or a device or a product. So first, you have an idea. The idea could come from academia or industry. And it's some new insight into, how Alzheimer's works or a new gene target, some new insight. And that leads into lead optimization, which is usually sort of a chemistry function. And then that product then goes into preclinical, which is animal studies. You test the drug in animals. And at the same time, you also do bioprocess development, which is basically scaling up the drug. And this is sort of everything. It's biochemistry, protein purification, fermentation, a lot of organic synthesis. And then it goes into an IND filing, which is done by regulatory affairs. And if it gets approved, it goes into human clinical trials, which is basically testing the drug or product on humans. And then you have more scale up in manufacturing. And then if it's successful, you apply for an NDA or BLA, and that's reviewed by the FDA. And if the product is reviewed, then the company celebrates. And then you have commercial operations and sales, and you have an area called medical affairs. So after the drug is approved, or device, you continue to test it in the real world, because in clinical trials, you've only tested it in a limited number of patients. But in the afterwards, you need to continue to monitor the drug to see how it's performing in different patient populations with drug-drug interactions. And then you also do clinical trials to expand the indication of the drug. So let's say it's only indicated for a specific, very specific area, and you want to expand that so you can increase your market. Also, so that more people can have access to this. And so there's a lot of areas of medical affairs. And then there's also about communicating this new data to the world, to doctors, to patients. There's also during this process of, operations running the company. So let me tell you that drug development is a risky endeavor. So in a typical company, they might screen millions of compounds, and of those, only maybe 7 make it into preclinical animal studies. And of those, only 1 or 2 might make it to the clinical trial stage. And of those, only 1 in 10 are approved. So there's significant attrition at each of these steps, which is why this industry can be very volatile. The entire process can take up to 15 years and cost over $1 billion. And small little biotechs can't raise $1 billion. So what they do, and so it turns out that the biotech companies are very good at ideas and innovation. And the big pharma companies are really strong in those clinical trials and commercial operations and sales. That's where they are great. And what the business development people do is when the product is in preclinical or clinical trials, they actually license those products to the big pharmas and manage that entire business development, the licensing of those products. And so that's what they do. Okay, let's see. Okay, so what I'm showing you now are careers in research. And for some reason, the movie's not working. But anyways, the easiest entry for scientists is in these 3 areas: research, preclinical research, and product development. And this is the easiest because this is what you're the most qualified for. This is the real science. And most people enter these areas, and then once they work in industry, they move around. So they move around to regulatory, marketing, operations, they move all over. And all these areas are occupied by PhD or master's level scientists and MDs. So what I'm showing you here, and I'm just giving you sort of a high-level overview of the many careers in industry. But what I'm showing you here are I've outlined those career areas where people are actually involved in doing bench research, which is only 4 chapters. So if you love science but have no longer want to do any more bench research, I've outlined here all these other career areas where you can be completely immersed in science and no longer doing bench research. If you're interested in business, having a business background will help you with all these careers. But in particular, a career in project management, what you're doing is you're managing the projects, but you're not the decision maker. You're managing the process of making the decisions. And actually, project management is in all these areas. And what's fun about it is you get to learn about all the intricate details and nuances of making products. And then once you learn that, you can really run the company. But I'll talk more about all these other careers. Okay, so if you would like to be a CEO one day, the vast majority of CEOs in industry come from sales and marketing. So what is marketing? Marketing is about strategy, and strategy is about predicting the future. What would the future look like in 5 and 10 years? Will we need a drug for Alzheimer's? How many patients will there be? What's the competitors? And it's very analytical. So there's a lot of PhD and MD scientists and medical doctors that go into marketing. And it's also about, you have a great product. How do you tell the world about this great product under the purview of the FDA? So a lot of CEOs come from marketing because marketing is about strategy, but it's also for people who are very ambitious and want to run companies, and there's great training in marketing. So management consulting is actually marketing, and sometimes a lot of it is marketing, but there's other parts, operation. So it's just that it's a service. Marketing here is in-house in the companies, but management consulting is a service for companies. And so when the company is, like let's say they have a product that's not doing well and sales is going down, people come in, bright scientists, and they try to analyze the market and come up with clever ways to increase sales. But it's not only that, it also helps with operations and other aspects of the company. Okay, a lot of CEOs in the biotech industry come from research, and they also come from clinical. And there's many medical doctors that are CEOs of biotech companies. A lot of lawyers, because lawyers can articulate well and they can explain the technology. The operations is running the company, and there's a lot of PhDs and medical doctors who run companies, and they're next in line to become CEO because they're running the company. Business development, they're doing deals. And the CEOs are also doing the deals with the venture capitalists to raise capital. So then business development is great training to go into being the chief executive. Okay, who would like to earn a lot of money? Where is the money? So clinical development is a main area because that's where the medical doctors are. And companies need to pay the medical doctors what they could be earning in clinical practice. So if you're a medical doctor in cardiovascular disease or oncology or neurosciences, you could be earning a heck of a lot of money, and companies need to pay the equivalent. And there's also sort of a supply-demand issue here, and there's not enough people in clinical, so salaries are really high. But the best one is sales. People in sales earn a heck of a lot of money. And it depends on what the ticket item is. So if you're selling a high price ticket item, you're going to earn more commission than a low price, like reagents is lower, but something really expensive like capital equipment or, really expensive item, then you make tons of money. And you don't need a PhD to do well in sales. Lawyers can do extremely well. If you're a partner in a law firm, they can easily earn over $1 million a year, but it's extremely competitive, and a lot of people don't become partners. But that's a great career. But the number one area where they earn the most money is investment bankers. So what do? They do huge financial transactions. They could be mergers and acquisitions, IPOs, and it's a very aggressive industry. You're traveling all the time. You're getting these deals. You're dealing with huge quantities of money, and it's I have a great quote in my book. I didn't make it up. This is based on, the 225 people I interviewed. It says the only 2 days that you can take off at work in investment banking is at your own wedding and at your own funeral. So it's extremely kind of, competitive area. And it just goes to show that there's a direct correlation between stress and making money. So this is one of those value goals, qualities that you need to think about when you're looking at careers, because if you want to make a ton of money, it's going to be stressful. And if you want sort of a 9-to-5 job, it's going to be less stressful, but it usually doesn't pay as well. And that's kind of how it works. Okay, what's hot? Well, what I'm showing you here, as hot as in demand. All the applied sciences are very hot, in particular regulatory affairs. What is regulatory affairs? And why is that? Well, for one thing, regulatory affairs is for the people who are very detail-oriented and pay attention to details, but they're also able to work with people because they need to ask people in clinical and project management and product development and research, discovery research, all these areas, and also operations and manufacturing to write their sections for the regulatory filings. And then they interact with the FDA to get those filings. So it takes a combination of being very able to work with people and being a good influencer and also being detail oriented, and not that many people have that combination of skill sets. And the other reason is there's a huge supply demand issue with regulatory affairs. There's not enough people with regulatory affairs training. And so people just don't know about it, and they don't think about it when they are looking at careers. And you can get a professional science master's degree in it or take extensions. It's hard to get in, but once you're in, you are guaranteed employment and job security, and you're guaranteed being paid really well for the rest of your life. So regulatory affairs is the hottest area there is. So I highly recommend it. It's a great career. You'll learn a lot. It's a lot of fun. And so that's a great career. If you're interested in job security, that is the place to go. Let's see. Another issue with regulatory affairs is you become a specialist in your therapeutic area. And it takes a long time to learn the nuances of regulatory, and it's hard to move around in different therapeutic areas. So there's another issue too, why they are in high demand. The other one that's in extremely high demand right now is bio-IT. What is that? That's everything from the life scientist who has an interest in computer science and the computer scientist who has an interest in biology, everything in between. And those people are in high demand right now because of next generation sequencing and the large data that's generated. And data is king in the life sciences and managing all that data. And so we have this huge demand for bio-IT right now. And particularly with AI and machine learning and using those to predict and for predicting and for making better quality drugs and products. So right now, bio-IT is really hot. Okay, what are the most coveted jobs? So a lot of people want to go into marketing because it's fun, it's ambitious, it's about people, it's about psychology. But you're competing with the recently minted MBAs, and you're also competing with the salespeople who want to go into marketing. Business development is also very coveted. It's very glamorous. You're making a huge impact in companies. It's very strategic, and it's really glamorous. You're traveling all the time. You travel over 50% of the time, and but there aren't that many business development careers. So a small little company, a VP of business development can come in and do all the deals, and there isn't a lot of training in business development, but a lot of PhDs want to go in there. It's a great career. Again, it takes you to being CEO one day. But the number one most coveted career, and by far the best career, is venture capital. So what is it they do? They raise money from limited partners, and then they invest on the hottest technology. And it's the greatest career because you get to meet all the entrepreneurs and hear about all the latest cutting edge research. And you make your bet on which company you think is going to be the most successful. And then often you sit on the boards and you sort of manage your money. But it is by far the best job. It pays really well. It's not as stressful as all the others, and you get to learn about all the latest science. It's the best. And if anybody's interested in that career, there is a free nonprofit called the Kaufman Fellow. I think I have it later in the slides. And you can apply and attend some events. And if you can become a Kaufman Fellow, it's a great way to get into venture capital. You can also join a venture capitalist and associate and work in the venture capital firm, and you'd be doing technical due diligence on their companies that they're thinking of investing in, and you'd be doing due diligence on the management team. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about work-life balance. So the number one reason people complained about the careers was the travel. And it wasn't so much travel, but the unanticipated travel. So it's when you plan for the weekend and you have an anniversary party or a birthday or something and you get that call, I gotta go to China, and you really have to go, and you miss out on all the family fun. So people complain the most about travel. So what I'm highlighting here are those careers where there can be, not always, but there can be a lot of travel. Of course, I mentioned investment banking is one of the worst. Management consulting, crazy amount of travel. Business development, again, more than 50% of the time. Management consulting is, I think, 80%. It's something ridiculous. Salespeople can travel, depends on where their territory is. If they're in a big city where there's already a lot of business, they don't travel so much. But if they take over a large territory, there can be more travel. And clinical development can involve a lot of travel because you're visiting the various areas where they're doing the clinical trials. But there's also a lot of careers that don't require any travel or hardly any. And I've outlined those as well. And that's better for, if you want to have a family and you want more of a 9-to-5 career. But what I've done here is highlight those careers where you have excellent work-life balance. And the number one area that I came up with was technical support. So what they do is they manage cases. So people call in and say, hey, my Western blot isn't working, or and they help scientists work through this technical problems. And so you're basically helping scientists, and you manage each of these as a case, and then you're usually recruited into their product development area because you become a technical expert in an equipment or a product. So technical support's a great 9-to-5 job. It's very supportive, family-like environment. People really like this career. And the equivalent of that is drug safety. And that's for the same thing, but for drugs. So if a drug isn't working or there's an adverse reaction, doctors call in to the drug safety specialists, and they treat the problem as a case, and they try to figure out what went wrong. And usually it's the doctor is misprescribing the drug. But not always. If there's actually a problem with the drug that didn't show up in the clinical trials, then it becomes a big problem. They have to do a drug recall. Or they can do pharmacovigilance and report that data to the FDA. But in general, drug safety is a great 9-to-5 work-life balance job. All these others are more, you can work from home quite a bit, like market research, bio IT. You can kind of telecommute quite a bit. Anything to do with writing, medical writing. Medical writing actually is a great career. Medical writing will take you into regulatory affairs, clinical, medical affairs. It's a great entry into the clinical and regulatory world. So is drug safety. Those are really good ones for entry level. But all these others are good too. Also, don't forget, there's a lot of great jobs in government. You can work at the USPTO. It's used to be just in the Washington area. Now that it's all over, but you can be involved in writing patents or other regulatory areas. But there's a lot of careers at the FDA. In fact, they do research there. There's many careers. There's too many to list here. There's at the CDC. You can do public policy. If you're interested in public policy, there's the AAAS fellowship. That's a very good one. You can do auditing. So there's lots and lots of careers in government. And what I've outlined here are careers where right now, without any more degrees, you can enter these jobs with these titles, scientist. And what I haven't talked about, which I should mention, is this area of product development, which is basically scaling up. And there's a lot of biochemists and fermentation scientists, organic synthesis, that's over here, and the process development area. I haven't really talked about medical science liaisons, which are a very common entry-level career for PhDs and MDs. And basically what you're doing there is you're talking to medical doctors and providing the latest clinical data on the clinical trials. And what's really great is you're helping doctors be better doctors because they want to provide the best care to their patients. And so by giving them the latest clinical data, they can be more effective as medical doctors. But there's also medical education, there's competitive intelligence, there's scientific affairs, which is really fun. You're basically working in the company to figure out new publications, and you're working with writing those publications and getting those publications submitted. It's a really fun area. So medical, and there's also clinical trials and medical affairs. And marketing, the great entry is market research. Basically what you're doing there is you're analyzing the market, you're talking to potential customers and saying, hey, I've got this new product. You know, would you be interested? What would make it a better product? How much would you be willing to sell? And that is market research. Is the other area that's really a good entry is health outcomes research, which is understanding reimbursement. Another area that's really great, super good for entry level, is a field application scientist. And so what you're doing there, which is actually in the product support area, field application scientist, and what you're doing there is you're the scientific expert explaining a product to potential clients. And what's really fun is you get to meet all the professors and people in industry, VP of research, and all the big pharmas and small biotechs, and get to explain the technology, be the expert, and they ask you questions, and you basically help them design their experiments. You help them, you know, they can say, hey, I need this and this. Oh, you might consider getting this product. So you're really helping scientists here. It's not really sales, you're helping sales, but you're kind of really sort of informing people about products. And there's a great quote in my book for field application scientists is that you learn so much because you're meeting all these other scientists and learning what everybody's doing, that it's like drinking water from a fire hose. So you're just going to be overwhelmed with so much science. There's also an area called a trainer. It's kind of like being a teacher, and you're training people on how to use new techniques. Let's see, corporate communications, again, think about that AAAS fellowship, but there's also marketing communications, where you're basically writing press releases. They love to have PhDs in those areas because you need to be, the technical expert. Let's see what we haven't talked about. Quality. There's 3 areas of quality: quality control, quality assurance, and quality systems. And basically you're testing products to make sure things are clear, clean, and then quality assurance is the paperwork involved in making sure that everything is kosher. Let's see, we talked about this area. Again, here's the Kaufman Fellowship if you're interested in venture capital. In law, there's actually many areas of law. People think about just patent law, but there's actually corporate law, transactional law, regulatory law, and litigation. Litigation is doing lawsuits. Corporate law is building companies and forming companies and forming the stock. And then transactional law is kind of like business development, where you're doing deals. So I think I've covered sort of in a very, very high level overview of the many careers that are available. I know it's a very high level overview, but it's a good start. So with that, there are so many careers to choose. And what I'm showing you here is each of these little lines are career areas, and there's over 100 different careers in industry. And I will say that there's many more in the real world. These are just the ones that I described, but there's many more. And I also, I didn't go into too much detail into pharma. I was really trying to focus on biotech, but biopharma, they're the same. But basically there's many more careers than this. And it's really up to you to figure out what's the right career for you, because they're all different. And every one of you are different. And so you need to figure out what's the right one for you. Okay. Also, for those of you looking for jobs, there are many different areas to look at. So most people, when they're looking for jobs, they think about making drugs. But there's also vaccines, drug delivery, molecular diagnostics, but there's also the tools. So those are the companies making reagents, instruments like microscopes, genomics and platform companies, bio IT, software and hardware, and diagnostics. But then there's the services, and those companies are really hiring because many of the biotech and pharma companies, they make a minimal team, and then they outsource a lot of the work to the service companies. So, and there's many of those, but in particular, the ones that are really hiring are those contract research organizations. So they mainly do clinical trials, but they also do preclinical and research. And then there's for the medical device industry and the biotool industry, there's the contract manufacturers. And those are companies making the products. There's many agencies: PR, advertising, market research, medical communications. And then there's miscellaneous biotech pharma areas like ag bio. Industrial biotech, that would be like making plastics, detergents, enzymes. There's molecular diagnostics, veterinary companies, foundations we'll talk about in a second, clean tech and energy, which is very hot right now. So being able to purify water or reuse water is a hot issue. Journalism, viticulture, food tech is really hot, especially in the San Francisco area. And there's a, the idea of, biotech, food tech is a really old tech. It's been around for ages. And now you can use new understandings that you've gained in biotech and the pharmaceutical industry to make new foods. So there's like people making hamburgers that taste and look and sizzle just like a hamburger, but they're made entirely out of plants. And there's many other things. You can make threads, you can make mycelium mats that are like leather. There's so many new areas. It's really amazing. Okay, then as mentioned, there's many careers in government, lots of them, too many to talk about. I know people have gone into the CIA, FBI, and NASA, trade commissions, crime lab forensics. There's so many to consider. And then the medical device industry, there's lots of careers in the medical device industry, and they love to hire PhDs and medical doctors. So there's diagnostic companies, e-health, healthcare informatics, telemedicine, big data analytics. This field is really growing right now. And then there's many careers in academia, in addition to being, professor. So there's tech transfer, working in industry-supported labs, education, program management, working in incubators, being involved in career development, running a core facility, and administration, not like an admin, but like actually becoming the dean of a particular area. So there's lots and lots of careers to consider. So combinatorially speaking, if you take all these different areas and you multiply it by all these different career areas, you can see that combinatorially speaking, there's like hundreds of careers to consider. Oh, I don't know how I got back here. Sorry. And then also consider working in a nonprofit. Nonprofits are focused on finding a cure. And for just about every disease out there, there are nonprofits. And there's all different types of nonprofits. So some of them are involved in drug discovery. They have their own drug discovery efforts. Some of them just provide grants for academics. Some of them are involved in world health, education, lobbying, and the workforce. And I just started a list of the cancer nonprofits, but it just went off the slide. But there's many different types of nonprofits. And nonprofits are really fun because it's in between academia and industry. And you're working towards a cure. And it's a lovely place to work. I highly recommend them.
Toby, I just want to give you a heads up. We have about 10 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Oh, gosh. All right. Careers in healthcare, not going to talk about. Okay, so let's talk about how do you go about finding your ideal job? So this is, you need to list your skills, your interests, and your values and goals. And that's where you have your ideal job. And I would recommend working with career development at your university if you can, and they can help you with that. And then I highly recommend doing my idp.sciencecareers.org. And then if you're interested in careers more, you can do a simulation exercises to actually see if you like the job. And here's the website for that. Okay, so we only have 10 more minutes? Okay. So just want to mention here that academia and industry are similar but different. So in academia, it's in pursuit of knowledge and truth, and you have people asking different types of questions on their own project, and the ultimate goal is publications and grants. In industry, you're working in teams, and the end result is making money. And if you don't make money, it's the company is going to go under. So it's a very different mindset and a very different corporate culture. And it takes years to make that transition from academia to industry, and to, you know, it's very team oriented. It's very different than what you're used to in academia. So the team culture is very different. So I'm going to speed along because we only have 10 more minutes. And get to the, oh, this is important, careers. So if you don't have a PhD, here's the generic career path, where you can, you know, with a master's or BS, you can become a research assistant, not always, but you generally become a research associate and then a senior research associate, and there's a glass ceiling just in research. You can become associate scientist or scientist, and many of them go off to become a director, VP, or CEO in a different area. But for PhDs, it's a very different ladder. You can do a postdoc, and then you become scientist 1 to 3 and a group leader. And the group leader, there's a bifurcation to become a fellow or principal scientist. And that's kind of like being a tenured faculty member where you're really involved in the science. And then other people go the administrative path to director, VP of research, VP of R&D, and CEO. And what I want to mention is that this first step, it doesn't matter if you work in academia for 1 year or 10 years or 20 years, you're still going to want to enter at this first step because the techniques are different, the goals are different, the culture is different. It takes a long time to learn that. So if you're interested in career track in industry, you should start early. The other thing is, if you're famous, if you do great science, you can go in at any point. If you start your own company, you can become CEO. If you're a famous professor that's tenured, you can start a CEO or VP or R&D. So if you do great science, you're going to do well. Whether you're in academia or industry, you will do extremely well. Okay, I'm going to skip all these because we only have a few minutes. And we're going to provide the slides afterwards. But the easiest way to get a job is to join a startup. Try to get mentored. And I made a list here. Let's talk a little bit about the best way to get a job is to network. And then LinkedIn is the new resume. So people are no longer sending me resumes. They just link in with me. That's the way. And you know, people getting jobs by filling out their LinkedIn profiles. So here's my key points. You know more than you think you know. You'd be surprised. So apply to those jobs, not just the ones you're qualified for, but also the ones that interest you. And then embrace the concept of continued lifelong learning. So important. Once you get that job, keep learning. Keep trying new things. Don't stop learning because that makes you more marketable. Whatever you do, excel. Be the leader in your field, and that's the way you can, you know, be a brilliant scientist who does, you know, add value so that you can really make a difference. And whether you're in academia, government, industry, it doesn't matter. You're still going to do really well. Find your niche. Find where you can apply your science background and really have an impact. And the way you do it is you figure out where you fit, because you can't do everything. And it's, as I mentioned, it's really complicated. Making a drug is not easy. And there's many hundreds of people that are involved in making drugs. So, you know, find out what you can do where you can have that big impact. And then do what you love. And the reason I mention this is there's data that show that if you love your job and you enjoy what you're doing, you accomplish more. And the company wins and you win. So it's really about finding that right career for you. So where are the jobs? Successful biopharmas, those small venture-backed companies, a lot of jobs in academia, hospitals, those service companies, the kind of unusual areas like biofuels, food tech, and water tech. Recommendations for job search, really think about those non-glamorous jobs. Everybody wants business development. You know, try applying for other types of jobs. Think about temp to hire, contract work. Be really flexible about your title and level. Apply to those less known companies. I mean, you know, Genentech gets like 250,000 resumes a year. You know, go for those companies that nobody's heard of that are in your area. of interest. Apply to those service companies, and remember there's safety in the biotech hubs. So Boston and San Francisco are kind of the leaders. And if you lose your job for whatever reason, you'll find another because there's so many companies. San Diego is a distant third, but Boston and San Francisco are the main hubs. It's a great time to start a company if you have a great idea. There's a lot of resources right now. And then remember that your first job will not be your last job. So don't be so picky about your first job. Just get in there, work. You'll learn a lot. You can, you'll move on, but just remember that. It's a good learning. Let's see. What's going on here? Oh dear. This is a great time to enter the life sciences. The biotech industry is booming right now. So if you are interested in going in industry, this is a fantastic time. We still have significant unmet medical needs for all sorts of diseases, the neurosciences, cancer, infectious diseases, diabetes and obesity, cardiovascular disease. So if you work on some cures, people are living longer. We have an aging population. And now here's a list of resources. I'm going to provide this at the end because we're probably out of time. But if you're interested in careers in academia, I highly recommend At the Bench and At the Helm, written by Kathy Barker and also by the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory Press, but just by weird luck. Anyways, but those are really good books that kind of provide insight into how to run a company. There's a lot of great industry books. Science Lessons by Gordon Binder, the former CEO of Amgen, is a great book. I highly recommend it. It describes the corporate culture of industry and how we're able to be so flexible. All these other books are super good. There's also Craig Shimasaki, who wrote a book called Biotechnology Entrepreneurship. There's many other books like mine about careers in the life sciences. If you're interested in clinical, I highly recommend the book by Rebecca Anderson. There's information about my book. Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory Press saw that I was giving this talk, and they decided to provide a discount for members listening to this particular webinar. And so this is a website here, coldspringharborlaboratorypress.com/biocareers, and you can get a 30% discount. Here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me. I am a recruiter. I just do biotech recruiting just in the San Francisco Bay Area. And definitely feel free to link in with me. And I want to thank you. I thank you for your time. I recommend you start companies, you be successful, and may you find a cure for cancer. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Hey, thank you so much, Toby, for all that wonderful information. Just a couple things before we get into the Q&A. We will send around more information from the talk after this webinar, so keep an eye out in your emails for anyone who wants some more information about the presentation, slides, Toby's contact, things like that. It will come out just a little bit later, potentially in the week. And then I just wanted to thank the ASCB for hosting, Toby for speaking and taking her time, and then ASCB Compass, which for those of you who don't know is the Student and Postdoc subcommittee for ASCB. This is through their career panel aspect. So thanks to everyone else who helped put it together. Okay, so we have a variety of questions, Toby. I'm gonna start kind of with some of the earlier ones. One attendee is asking, they're currently second year PhD. They do not like their program. They're asking, is it better to switch their program, switch to industry now, continue with their PhD? What advice would you give to someone who's in a position where they're not quite happy in their PhD currently?
Okay, that's a great question. I would ask, why are you not happy? Is it that you don't like the bench work or you don't like your boss? So depending on which answer, so if you don't like your boss, find a new boss. If you don't like the school, find a new school. If you don't like doing bench research, then you might think about all these other careers, like I mentioned, that don't involve bench research. If you like doing the bench research, but you don't feel like you want to be a professor. So academia trains you to be professors. That's what it is. That's why you go to get your PhD. It's training to be a professor. If you feel like you don't want to be a professor one day, like me, I didn't want to be a professor, think there is high demand for people with a master's degree or an undergrad, but it's much better to have a master's degree. And that would be that chart where I show you with the senior research associate. So senior research associates, if they work for 5 to 10 years, 15 years, they can become scientists and even sometimes senior scientists. And they can do extremely well. And actually there's more demand for those master's research associates than there is for recently minted PhDs. And in fact, they can even earn more money than recently minted PhDs. It's just that the PhDs will move up the ladder faster. That's a great career. You're paid really well, you're treated well, but I will warn you, you'll be spending the vast majority of your time doing bench research, but it is possible that you move into a more managerial role, or you can move around to any career you want, basically, once you're in industry. I mean, I know lots and lots of people with master's degrees that went into operations or CEO, became CEO, or they went into marketing. You can be very successful without a PhD. The PhD will give you more credibility, but other than that, if you're looking at supply demand, there's much more demand right now for somebody without a PhD for entry level into industry. And you could also work in industry for a while, and then if you really feel like you need to get a PhD, you can go. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, following up a little bit on that, for students that are getting towards the end of their PhD, when is a good time to start applying for industry jobs, or when do new graduates, or if they're going to defense students, start applying? And then usually, do they always go for that industry postdoc, or is it possible to go straight to a scientist one?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the current trend, and every company is a little different, so I just want to warn you, you can skip the postdoc and you would be and apply directly as an associate scientist. That's the title. And it's a little bit below scientist. And then you quickly move up to scientist. And we do, as a recruiters, we count years of industry experience. We don't count years of academia. They don't count. Only years of industry. So everybody's kind of like, that's how I rate candidates. They have 5 years industry, 10 years industry experience, not how many years they've been in academia. So if you're really interested in industry, it's a good idea to skip the postdoc. You can also work and do a postdoc in industry, although those are very hard to get. They look great on your resume, and usually they're kind of, I have a couple slides of this, but they're given to people, you're doing kind of basic research, so the door is still open if you want to go back to academia. And so those are really, really, if you can get one of those are great to have. And people love to hire postdocs in industry. So that's a really good one. Let's see. So when's a good time to apply? I run into this, I'm a recruiter, right? I run into this problem all the time where I have a great candidate, but they can't start for 6 months. Well, as a recruiter, my clients want to hire somebody like yesterday. And so they don't want to wait 6 months. But at the same time, I also have friends in bigger companies who will spend a year recruiting. And so they'll wait for people. So it's really quite variable. When is the best, what you should do while you're still in graduate school and addressing when to apply, you should be networking. You should be going to conferences. You should be speaking so people know who you are, showing that you are the expert in your field, and networking and building your LinkedIn profile so that you have a lot of connections, so that when you are, and also collaborate with your industry cohorts, so that when you are ready and you're starting to really look for industry careers, you can reach out to people and they can help you. So that's what I would recommend. But when's a good time to apply? I don't really, you can apply, every company is different. So like I said, some companies will spend a year, like other companies, they want to hire somebody in 2 weeks. So it's really variable. Good question.
Okay. So this one is about, if you're not in one of those big cities where there are biotech hubs or even larger cities, how possible is it to get a job in a more rural area, or coming from a more rural area if you're not necessarily plugged into those networks?
Okay, that's a good question. Now, first off, I want to say, do not fake where you live. I get sometimes resumes of people say they live in San Francisco and they're not from San Francisco and they're not actually living in San Francisco. And honestly, being misinformative at the beginning of a conversation based on trust is not the first way to start your conversation. So I always want to see where the person is located. And it is true, the companies will prefer the local candidates, but it's only because the cost of living. So San Francisco, the cost of living is crazy. And Boston is also very high. And it's hard to recruit people to those areas because, you know, they might get a great salary, but then when they realize how much it costs to live here, they might say, oh, forget it. So there's this challenge. You know, what you can do, there's things you can do. You can, what I recommend is you say, I'm willing to pay for my own relocation costs. You can say, willing to relocate. You know, right now it's a really hot job market. It's so hot that we're, you know, all my clients are willing to consider candidates who are not from the San Francisco area because it's so challenging to find talent. So this is a great time to be looking for a job, and just be honest. Always be honest, be as and upfront. So like if you're interviewing and you have other job offers, let the hiring manager know, hey, I've got these 2 other job offers and I need to decide by, you know, next week. You should just be as upfront as you possibly can. Let them know what your circumstances are. If you have a family, you have a house, you have kids, you know, let them know that so they know, okay, you can only come in the summer when, you know, your kids can leave the school. You know, just provide as much information and be as upfront as possible. Yeah.
Okay. So our next question is a little bit, since most people are coming either from undergrad, master's, PhD, and are more familiar with academia, how can you help determine what jobs you might like in industry, since they are very different than what most people are accustomed to? And how important is your specific degree, whether it's the master's level, PhD, undergrad, in terms of the focus? And then how much does your academic record, like publications and things like that, matter when you're trying to make this whole transition?
Okay, those are all really good questions. So let me just go over the first one. So here's the basic career transition steps, which I ran out of time. So first, do some self-assessment. You know, work with your career development officer on campus. Do some self-assessment because you won't know what the best job is to learn about yourself and what your interests are and your goals, and then read about all those careers. You know, you can read my book, but there's other resources also out there where you can, you know, read and learn about those careers. Be like a scientist, be a detective, and learn about what your options are. And then you do informational interviews. So that's really where you could really address this question. So let's give an example. Let's say you're a scientist and you want to go into project management. So what you could do is meet other director level, maybe project managers, and interview them, not like a job interview, but an informational interview. And there's a lot of information on the internet about this, but basically you talk to them and ask them basically what I did for my book. I interviewed 225 people, and it was like an informational interview. I basically asked them what the career is like, you know, what are the pros and cons to the job, what's a typical day look like, how did you get in this career, you know, what are some good companies, what are some bad companies, you know, what are some additional resources, can you take a look at my resume, what do I need to do to get into this career? But you also interview them and find out, you know, is this a good match for me? Because the best way to do that is to talk to people who are currently doing that career, and they can kind of assess whether you're a good match for this career. So informational interviewing is the way to do it. And a lot of people get jobs through informational interviews because they meet people and say, oh, yes, my company's hiring. We're looking for project managers. You should apply. So that's a good way. Another way is mentoring. So a mentor, what you want to look for in a mentor is not your boss or somebody who has sway over your career, but somebody who's actually working in the area that interests you and can guide you in your career and also give you advice. It's quite often, you know, people make, you know, they have personality quirks or qualities, and they can kind of mentor you and say, hey, I recommend that you don't do this, or you do this, or maybe you should take a class in this, and they can give you some really good advice. You can also do an internship. And so then once you've done all that and you really know exactly what you want, then you want to develop your resume. And there's an art to that. And then you want to network and apply for jobs and interview and find employment. And you want to be networking all along through this whole process. So then, so I hope I answered, how do you go about finding the right job? And a lot of this is luck and serendipity. Also listen to your friends. Your friends will give you good advice. They might say, hey, you might be really good at sales, or you might be good at marketing, or venture capital. Have you ever thought about a career in venture capital? And really listen and really think about this and just be open-minded about what people recommend. Now on publications, this is kind of controversial. So it depends on the position you're applying for. So if you're applying for a scientist position, we in industry, we can't really judge how good you are as a scientist. And the way we do that is by looking at the number of publications you have. That's one of the qualities that we look for. So if you don't include your publications on your resume, you may not be considered for the opportunity. For example, at Genentech, for a scientist level position, they won't even look at your resume without a Nature Science or Cell paper. It's kind of a well-known, knowledge here. So if you don't include your resumes, they're not going to consider you at all. So if you don't include publications. So I really highly recommend that you include all the publications, not just a select group, because we're looking at the number of publications. We want to see how prolific you are and how good a scientist you are, because that's one of the parameters we use to determine how good a scientist you are. So in particular, you want to have the titles of your publications, because those are the key words. So you never know what those keywords are going to be. You don't know, but the more words you have, the more likely people will consider you. And particularly on your LinkedIn profile, the more keywords you have, the more likely a hiring manager or recruiter will contact you for an opportunity, because we do keyword searches. We look for these keywords, and the profiles get pulled up, and then we contact the ones with the most keywords. So that's kind of what we're doing. I don't know. I hope I answered that question. But I love publications. And in fact, if I get a resume and there's no publications, what I do for the scientist positions is I write to them and say, hey, can you send me your resume with your publications, please? Which is, annoying, because I'm like, I don't. But for marketing or sales, it's not as important, management consulting. But let's take a scenario. Let's say a scientist applies for, sales or marketing position, and they don't list their publications. Another scientist, everything given equal, sends their resume, but they say, I'm an expert at, neurosciences. I've written book chapters. I have, 15 publications. I have, posters and abstracts. Who are they going to pick? They're going to pick the expert. So how do you show your expertise? You show it your publications.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess for our last question, this has come up a couple of times. How, aside from some of your experience, how do you make yourself stand out amongst all the different candidates? And what are some key skills and outside of science as well, what people look for in future candidates?
Wow. Okay. Well, for the key skills, it's excellence. We want to see excellence. We want to see that you're the top scientist or a key strength. And you do that by showing, the product. If you're a great writer, we want to see all the grants that you've gotten or all the articles that you've written. If you're a great scientist, we want to see publications. If you're an expert at, PCR, flow cytometry, we want to say, oh, I'm an expert at, we want to see, we're hiring you for your technical expertise. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're hiring you for those scientist positions. So don't hide that in your resume. Have it up front, obvious, so that we can, say, oh, this person's an expert at flow cytometry. This is a great candidate. You can also highlight your skills, like in sales. You can say, hey, I increased sales by 100%, and put it in bold and say, yeah, I'm really good. Here's some, but we want to everything should be data driven. You can't just sales. Nope, we want to see some data here, right? We're scientists. And then the other question was, how do you make yourself stand out? Yeah, so all those things would make yourself stand out. The way to make yourself different from everybody else, you don't want to make yourself too different. It's a kind of conservative industry. If you do like a resume with charts and graphs, that may not fly. If I see a resume with charts and graphs, I think this person's been looking for a job for a long time and they just can't get a job because they're spending their time making these fancy charts and stuff on their resume. If I see a bad resume, I really like those because it means, oh, this person's, you know, probably a great scientist. I've placed some really great scientists that had really bad resumes. If I see a one-page resume, I think, I get disappointed. If I see a two-page resume, I'm kind of disappointed too. If I see a many-page resume with lots of information and publications, I think, oh, this person really accomplished a lot. This must be a good scientist. That's kind of how I'm thinking about things. So how do you make yourself stand out? Be clear on your resume. Be really clear and have space, easy to read. And also you want to be in alignment with the company's interests. So the companies like to hire people who are experts in their area. So if you're an infectious disease expert, apply to those infectious disease companies, and they're more likely to consider you than like an oncology company. So find those companies that are in your area of expertise.
Okay, well, we're just hitting, I guess 2 o'clock now for the East Coast, but 11 a.m. on the West Coast here. So thank you so much, Toby, and thank you for everyone who participated. We'll try and send out the information follow-up sometime this week. And just again, thank you to ASCB and ASCB Compass and Toby and Shanti, who was doing more of the technical support. Yeah, hopefully we should have a couple, 2 more of these from the ASCB Compass Careers panel throughout the year. So any of you who might be interested in additional seminars, keep an eye out on our website for it.
Okay, great. Thank you and best of luck.